This is the Jerry Doyle Show.
I was coming up with a little song this morning in my head. I wouldn't burden you with it, but do you know the song? Has anybody seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? I think a lot of people would want to know why the GOP decided to go forward and name their 7 headline speakers for the Republican National Convention in Tampa and not include Ron Paul or Sarah Palin, for that matter. And again, if you're putting together an event and you say, you know, this is the big event that we're having, and this has been a much anticipated lineup of speakers, you would say, okay, appearing, you know, August 27th through the 30th in Tampa, Florida, U2 and Bono. And then you go, and others to be named later. So you always name your big names. You want to get people excited about it. You want to get people interested in the event. And here we are now, getting the lineup of Rick Scott, John McCain, Condoleezza Rice, Nikki Haley, John Huckabee, John Kasich, and Susanna Martinez. No Sarah Palin, no Ron Paul. Why? Why wouldn't you have Ron Paul there? My guy. I was the first, if not the only, nationally syndicated host that came out and endorsed Ron Paul back in, what was it, November or December of last year? Somewhere around there.
December
of last year. Because I thought a consistent conservative could beat a consistent socialist, and Ron Paul has been anything but consistent. And out there, consistently campaigning, the last man standing that had a lot of people very excited about what it is that the Ron Paul movement is all about. Has anybody here seen my old friend Ron? Can you tell me where he's gone? But more importantly, can you tell me why, especially in light of that vote that went down in the House last week, overwhelmingly supporting auditing the Fed, that was embraced by just about everybody on the stage that wanted to be the Republican nominee for president, Ron Paul, with a huge influence on the Republican Party, isn't given one of the 7 headline speakers positions at the convention? Joining us on the program, Senior Policy Advisor to Ron Paul, Bruce Fein. Mr. Fein, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Jerry.
I was telling the audience that I wasn't going to sing them that song. Has anybody here seen my old friend Ron? But, you know, I look at the disheartened nature of a lot of the people in the Ron Paul movement, that the sentiment is anywhere from I'm going to vote for him as a write-in, meaning Ron Paul. I'm going to vote for the Libertarian Gary Johnson. I'm going to turn my back on the GOP and vote for Obama, or I'm going to stay home on Election Day. And some people saying, well, I guess I'm just going to back Mitt Romney anyway. How does this not help the GOP, or is this a smart move by the GOP to not have Ron Paul in a prominent speaking position?
Well, I think it's misguided both for the GOP and even perhaps more important for the country. The Romney camp now is staked out a position, in my judgment, that makes it really little different than Obama, except at the curlicues. Huge government, huge spending, trillion-dollar deficits, a military-industrial complex that's shielded from competition and vastly bloated, a government that can assassinate, spy, enter our bedrooms, intercept our emails at the drop of a hat. And when you ask Romney, well, where is he cutting? It's just all opaque. It's all what we know is kick the ball down the road, and we'll actually stop the spending at some future time. And Ron Paul is the one that actually came up with a budget that makes the so-called Ryan plan that Romney has endorsed, look like a Tea Party. Ron actually would cut billions of dollars, trillions of dollars out of the deficit, so that actually would start to reduce the national debt from $16 trillion down, I'd hope, to zero. So we're not saddling posterity with all our extravagance. That's not what the Democrats, the Republicans are about. If you look at the so-called hard line that Romney purports to represent, it's just in favor of only increasing the national debt from 16 to 21 trillion over the next 10 years instead of 16 to 23 trillion, which just is more of the same. And the unwillingness of the Republican Party and the muckamucks there to give Ron Paul, a megaphone, if you will, to make his argument, is just another example of why we're heading off a cliff as a country, as well as the Republican Party. It simply refuses to acknowledge what we've all got to recognize. We have a bloated government that we need to practice austerity like any financial household that's run over in its debts. And if we don't, end our attempt to project the military every square inch of the planet to defend everybody except ourselves, we're going to fall to ruination. And Ron Paul's the only one that's carrying that message, and the Republican hierarchy just doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to walk away from all the goodies. The only difference between the Republicans and Democrats in the mainstream is Republicans have different people who want to receive the goodies. The banks, the military-industrial complex, as opposed to the green technologies and all the money that the Democrats want to throw on their favorites. And that's very, very depressing. I mean, we learned about the effort to try to do real tax code reform, and the Republicans end up voting for tax credits for windmills and everything else under the sun that's in their district. Well, why do we have elections if all this is about is how you divide up the spoils? And that's why Ron Paul needs and deserves a voice at the convention, and what he's being drowned out, because he would make the actual nominee, Mr. Romney, look like he really is not someone who's for change.
When I looked at the Republicans deciding to go along with the 6-month extension of funding the government under the latest continuing resolution, I said, well, why is it that the Republicans voted 33 times to repeal and or defund Obamacare when, in fact, now what they've done is they voted to fund Obamacare for another 6 months? They said, well, after the election, we're going to take a look at what we really need to do. After the election, we're going to take a look at repealing and replacing and defunding Obamacare. After the election. Well, they just voted to continue funding Obamacare for 6 months. In a certain way, you can't even shame the Republicans into the shameless displays of these show votes that they've had into standing up and doing today what needs to be done yesterday, but yet kicking the can down the road again till tomorrow.
You're exactly right, Jerry, and that's the corruption, if you will, of the soul of the Republican Party, as maybe the Democrats didn't have a soul to corrupt. But shows it's just Tweedledee and Tweedledum again. This is what, to think of this, we came in 2010, 2 years ago, with the so-called Tea Party revolution, people coming to Washington were really going to cut the budget. What have we seen? That $14 trillion debt now at 16 going to $17 trillion. I mean, what's happened? And then we can see all these stories about, how austere, how Scrooge-like the Republicans are, Well, hey, you're dealing with optical illusions. There's nothing Scrooge-like in anything that they're voting for. And so they'll sometime posture, so they'll vote something that they know won't go through the other chamber, so it'll just die, so they can say, well, at least I voted for it, even if it's just like wallpaper for decoration, because nothing really is going to happen. And when push comes to shove, to actually cutting the budget, to cutting these huge conceptions of entitlement out there, they all flinch. They all have their own favorites they want to shower money to. One perfect example is the chairman of the House Armed Service Committee, Buck McCann. He's basically said, we can't cut the military budget. It's our industrial program, to prop up companies that need to give jobs. He was totally unabashed about it. Okay, well, it's just another version of the TARP program. Well, he just wants to throw money at bloated defense industry, and the Democrats want to throw money at Cylinders and green technologies and other companies going bankrupt, and that's killing the country.
I look at what the Republicans also did with regard to student loans. I would expect the Democrats to, help students cry, woe is me, because of the potential increase in the rate from 3.4 to 6.8, which is about $6 a month increase of an interest cost. But some people would say, Mr. Fein, well, okay, so the Republicans are selling moderation, or they're selling inclusion, but once they get in, and once they get the White House and the House and the Senate, then they're going to actually become fiscal conservatives.
Well, the point is that is a slogan that we've heard for the last 25 years, and it's told to be phony on every single occasion. We were going to abolish the Department of Education, going to abolish this, that. It never happened. And once you've been lied to 3 or 4 times, then it's your fault if you believe it the 7th or 8th time.
Right.
And the fact is, if you believe in something, you act on that foundation, whether you're going to win the election or not. And this is where, Jerry, I think the fundamental pathology in our politics in the Republican Party is that the destiny of a country is less the outcome of a particular election than the philosophy and ideas that are prevailing and are pushing forward towards a new dispensation. And if you never stand up and say, I don't care whether I lose my election the next time, I'm not going to vote for these entitlements, for the squandered money that we cannot afford, and say I'm risking my job, I'll take a loss at the election in order to teach and show the constituents that this is the wrong course, then things are never going to change.
That's hugely important.
You can lose an election and win the war of ideas. That's what these politicians don't understand, because they don't understand ideas, because they don't have any other than electing themselves to power. They fail to recognize, unless they change the values of what we are as a country and the purpose of government, this is a never-ending battle that's going in one direction only, down.
Yeah, and that's hugely important, Mr. Fein. I think if people decided, you know what, we're not going to go along with this continuing resolution, we're willing to have a budget fight, we're willing to risk shutting down the government. Most of it won't shut down anyway. It never has, and it won't because it can't. But I think that would be rewarded at the ballot box rather than trying to pander to special interest groups for whatever it is that they think is going to buy their vote this November. I think people would say, you know what, you're doing the right thing. And people recognizing who's doing the right thing are going to reward them with their votes by doing the right thing at the right time, not promising that when it's their time, then it's going to be our time.
You're absolutely right, Jerry. And then the puzzle is, well, how come the members of Congress, the politicians, don't understand it? And it's what I call the psychology operation of projection. They can't even conceive, because they're so egotistical and driven solely by offers of semi-bribes, that the American people actually are willing to be austere. They're willing to take, as long as it's even-handedly administered, they're willing to tighten the belt. And because the members can't even conceive of that, because they would never do that. They are so psychologically and intellectually corrupt that they project their own deficiencies on the American people and say, hey, if I would demand the goodies, all my constituents must. And that's the mental universe they operate in. And that's what makes them, in my judgment, as you're pointing out, refuse to do what would actually get them elected. I mean, I remember William Proxmire of Wisconsin. He had his Golden Fleece Award. He spent virtually nothing on his campaign. He voted against all the squandered programs. He got elected year after year, and he spent virtually nothing, But William Proxmire is forgotten, and everybody else just wants to shower everybody with goodies and bribe them in order to say, hey, I brought the pork home to you. That's what I'm supposed to do, and that's why you should vote for me.
I guess in the what you're supposed to do section now, Mr. Fein, by the way, Bruce Fein is with us, senior policy advisor to Ron Paul. He's the chairman of the American Freedom Agenda. RonPaul2012.com is the website. What do the Ron Paul supporters do, and even the Sarah Palin supporters for that point, that were not included in the notably absent and the also absent writings of who is going to be speaking? What is a Ron Paul movement follower to do at this point? Fall in line? Jump on the sword one more time for Johnny McAmnesty 2.0, Mitt Romney?
No. I mean, the best thing, in my judgment, is to use the write-in option that you've suggested and write in the candidate who really carries the flame, which be Ron Paul. It doesn't even have to be. I suppose if you're doing a write-in, you could write in for George Washington. But definitely, this is the case. We've got an election. It's a little bit like the Iran-Iraq War of 80 to 88. We'd wish that both sides could lose. Obama should lose and Romney should lose, because they do not reflect where the country ought to be going. Now, unfortunately, we can't have somebody in the White House who's none of the above. We actually need an occupant.
Right.
But that's how it seems to me. It is very important to vote, even if it's not going to be for Romney or Obama, simply to show you're actively involved, and it shows that your vote is available to be captured. You're engaged politically, even if you've not miscasted for either of the mainstream candidates.
And if not,
that's the protest vote, and that's what I would recommend be done, aside from the fact that you may want to write into the Republican National Committee and voice a protest. The Republican who feels that the party has abandoned them.
Absolutely. Bruce Fein, I thank you for your time on the program, senior policy advisor to Ron Paul. The movement certainly is still alive and well, a little frustrated at this point over the exclusion of Ron Paul in Tampa, but we will continue the process, and with your help, Mr. Fein, we will make sure that lives a long and prosperous life. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Bye-bye.
Take care. Stick with us. We're right back. I know a lot of people listening to Bruce Fein's comments where he said, look, the outcome of elections are not nearly as important as what it is that the principles are of the parties that we're voting for. To paraphrase what he said, I'm having Brad pull that because I thought that was hugely important. And I know this is 92 days out or whatever it is from the election, and we're all supposed to circle the wagons and get on board with Mitt Romney because a vote for anyone other than Mitt is by default a vote for Obama, and the nation's not going to survive another 4 years of Obama, and blah, 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 blah. But how many times do you continue to reward the Republican Party with your vote if it's not the guy that you want? Reince Priebus said, ours will be a world-class convention worthy of the next president of the United States. Well, look, we already have a president right now who's not worthy of being the president of the United States. And is Mitt Romney the worthiest of candidates that we could have to be the president of the United States? And if you reward the Republican Party with your vote one more time, just like they said to do with Johnny McAmnesty one more time, or Bob Dole one more time, how many times do you do it until the Republican Party knows that you're a laydown? And then they can say, we can do anything we want. We can violate any fiscally conservative principle. We can spend money for capitalism as opposed to what the Democrats do in spending money for socialism. And then you say, all right, I'm going to vote for Mitt Romney this time, and that's the last time. And if you try and do it to me one more time, I'm sitting out, or I'm writing in someone else's name. And they know you're not going to, because they know you're a gimme. You're a 200-pound fish you can land on 10-pound test. Stick with me.
This is the Jerry Doyle Show.